Hello and welcome, friends, to our SBT Sunday teachings. My name is Venerable Tarpa. Before we begin, let's take a moment to appreciate our very handsome community gathered here today, and it's a very happy one today. Today I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, and to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Again, welcome to our Sunday teaching. Today we are going to be exploring the Buddhist path, and namely the Threefold Path. So, what I wanted to share with you guys is that SBT has been working on a presentation, a different presentation of the Threefold Path. So most of you have been through the Skillful Living program, and which we just finished, and that's a heavy part of that teaching series is the Threefold Path. But as we work on the material, I'm always working hard to get better presentations of the material. Anyways, as I was digging into this particular subject, me and some of the instructors were talking, and it was actually one of our brilliant philosopher students, David Williamson from Scotland, who actually brought a great idea to the teachings. And I wanted to share that with you today, and I wanted to get everybody's opinion. This is a very loose fun class. I want to know what you guys think about this. I want to see if everybody's on board and you think that this is a good presentation. We put some effort into it. I think it's pretty cool, and I think it's probably one of the most important things that we have to understand about the path, and the clarity that we gain from it really benefits us. So with that said, what is he saying? So there's a couple of things. One, of the Threefold Path, we've changed the order of it, and we've changed some of the translation of it. And so how about if I put some slides on here to begin with. I gave us a bunch of slides so you wouldn't be bored and you'd have something to look at. So, this is the Buddhist path. And the Buddhist path is the Threefold Path. And it's the development of higher understanding, higher virtue, and higher awareness. And I'll explain what those are in a moment. But the Buddhist path is the Threefold Path. These are the three aspects that make up the Buddhist teachings and the Buddhist path. Everything in Buddhism, I know you're like me, Buddhism seems so complex sometimes, and there's so many this and that, and all these numbers, the 8 this, the 4 that, the 6 this, but in one way or another, all of those fit into these three aspects. Now, they're represented often by a triangle, and the triangle symbolizes their inner relationship, right? That there's a holistic aspect to these. There's no one aspect that's greater or more important than the other. The three have to come together, and the three are all dependent upon one another. So that's an easy way to remember it, is this threefold, is this triangle. Now, the traditional account of this, and the one that I learned when I was in school, the traditional threefold path, starts with higher virtue, higher concentration, and higher wisdom. And these are the terms that are most used in Western translations. So these are the standardized terms. But most teachers in the West have problems with some of these terms. And there's a lot of going back and forth about what the best definitions are of them. And so let's talk about that first. Let's talk about the terminology. So higher virtue, everybody's okay with that, right? Virtue, goodness, wholesomeness, skillfulness is another great way to think about virtue. But higher virtue, everybody's okay with that translation. The next one is the most problematic. When they talk about higher concentration, what they mean by this is single-pointed concentration. We talked a bit about this in our last teaching today. And single-pointed concentration is gathering and collecting our scattered awareness onto one object and gaining the ability to hold our awareness on a single object. In short, we're learning how to master our awareness, right? To be able to focus, to place, focus, sustain our awareness. That's what this is. Now, the originally the Pali term is samadhi, and samadhi is a much different word than concentration. So I think almost all the teachers really don't like the word concentration for a couple reasons. One, it sounds kind of strict, and this idea of concentration, this intense kind of a focus, and it's not. In fact, the great Theravada translator Bhikkhu Bodhi, oddly enough, translates samadhi as serenity. I thought that was so cool, right? Serenity, developing higher serenity. And there's others that collectiveness is another one that people like, right? Higher collectiveness, meaning again, collecting our scattered awareness. Usually we're focused on an activity, but at the same time, we're thinking about what comes next, what we did before. Where our awareness is rarely kind of fully focused on things. And so that idea of collectedness is another. Some people simply use the word meditation because meditation is one of the main aspects in cultivating concentration. And I've heard other people say mind, higher mind. I don't like any of those. And for the longest time, for many years, I've been writing about this and I've been changing my mind. And I finally came up with what I think is the perfect translation, or properly, the perfect interpretation. I like awareness, because awareness is something that we work on, but it's also an attainment as well. Like when we talk about a higher virtue, we're talking about cultivating virtue, but it's also an attainment, right? You can attain a higher virtue. Higher concentration refers more to a practice, but higher awareness, I think, is the most useful term. And more importantly, I think it's a term that people can hear and kind of understand right away. When you say higher concentration, it always has to be explained to people. If we say higher collectiveness, that would have to be explained to people. Meditation, again, that's more of a practice, or higher mind would have to be explained. But developing higher awareness, higher conscious awareness, I think is probably one of the clearest, and I think it's the most accurate, because when we talk about, again, the original term would have been samadhi in Pali, which is serenity. These are aspects of our awareness, right? Serenity and samadhi are mental states of awareness. So I chose to use the word higher awareness. And then number three, higher wisdom. This is fine with everybody. Everyone agrees upon it, except for this guy, Tenzin Tarpa. He doesn't like it. It doesn't seem to match with my experience. Wisdom to me, and maybe this is just personal, maybe it's semantic, wisdom to me sounds more like some exalted wisdom held only by a few of men with big beards smoking pipes in a back room and talking about philosophy, this exalted wisdom. But that's not my experience as I gain this higher wisdom. To me, it's not this exalted wisdom. Instead, it's simply understanding myself, understanding the world, understanding others, understanding reality, understanding how life works. Now, clearly, you could say that's wisdom, but I just think the word understanding seems more accessible, right? Developing proper understanding of myself in the world sounds attainable, doesn't it? Right? It's not something that just the great masters had. So anyways, on a personal note, I'm the only one that translates wisdom as understanding. And I like that very much. And so coming back, this is the SBT presentation of the Threefold Path. Higher understanding, which is wisdom and insight. Higher virtue, which is goodness, wholesomeness, skillfulness. And higher awareness, higher mental and meditative states of awareness, right? Okay. Now, another thing is you might have noticed is the order is different. And this is where our brilliant Sangha member, David, came in. And we were talking about this. So here, the traditional starts with virtue, then concentration, and then wisdom. And I've kind of turned it on its head. We start with higher understanding, higher virtue, and higher awareness. And you say, well, why would you do such a thing, Tenzin Tarpa? That makes no sense at all. It's because the Threefold Path is related to the Eightfold Path. And for you people that are beginners at Buddhism, don't worry, I'll explain it to you. Let me make this big so you can read it. So the Eightfold Path is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. The Eightfold Path is the Buddhist path for awakening. But the Eightfold Path is merely a more detailed presentation of the Threefold Path. They're exactly the same thing, just the Eightfold Path goes a bit more into detail. Okay? Now, as secular Buddhists, we look at all the different traditions, which is something that makes my job very difficult. Every time I got to talk about something, I got to go through all my notes and I have to remember, okay, what are the Theravada things? What are the Zen things? What are the Tibetans think? What are the Avanta and Hinduism? What do they think? So my life would have been a lot easier if I studied just Tibetan Buddhism and I could have shared one presentation. But nevertheless, this is where we find ourselves. So how the threefold and eightfold paths connect, merge, came from is quite a funny kind of thing. There's so many different opinions on how they work. I went back through all the old sutras trying to find some kind of definitive answer. I couldn't necessarily find it there. What I can do with all of you is I'm going to share with you some of the interesting things that I came up with, and you can decide for yourselves. You're all big boys and girls. So one school of thought is that the Threefold Path was the initial presentation of the Buddhist path that the Buddha gave to regular folks, right? And as you can imagine, it's simpler. There's only three aspects. And then for people that one story says that for people that it wasn't working and they were getting enlightened through following it, then came the Eightfold Path, was more detailed and showed them, well, exactly out of those three, which ones you need to work on. So some people believe that the Eightfold Path is a deeper presentation of the Threefold Path. Some say it's the other way around. Even within the same traditions in Theravada, you find both. Other people say the Eightfold Path was taught first, and then the Threefold Path was created for those to make it easier to remember the Eightfold Path. So I could not find a definitive answer anywhere, including the early sutras. So, but the Eightfold Path and the Threefold Path are basically looking at the same thing. So now if you look here, the Eightfold Path in the middle, these are in the correct order, right? There's no denying this. All these sutras, this is the order that everybody shares the Eightfold Path. Right view, number 1, 2, right intention, right 3, right speech, 4, right action, 5, right livelihood, 6, right effort, 7, right mindfulness, 8, right awareness. Usually that's right concentration, but again, I take the liberty of changing that. Briefly, who's making all that noise? Please mute yourself. Okay. So, just quickly, right view is right perspective. It's having the right understanding of the Buddhist teachings, if you're a Buddhist, but having the right understanding of who and what you are, your relationship to the world, to life, to reality, right? Right intention, sometimes they'll call it right mind or right thought, but I think all three words work really well together. It's that intent, that idea, whether it's your intention, your mind, your thoughts. It's just this mental cognition, right? I probably should start with this. The word right here is an interesting phrase. And just recently in our chat groups, there was a big debate about this. And I didn't want to chime in because I knew I was going to talk about it today. And people were saying, well, what does right mean? And is there any ultimate right and wrong? And they went on. And they were correct. According to Buddhism, values like right and wrong are subjective, right? They don't exist in the objective world. They only exist within minds. So there is no ultimate right or wrong. You know, most of the time it depends on our values and our own thoughts. But here, the easiest way to think about right is right according to the Buddha. One of the first things the Buddha taught was the difference between right and wrong, right? And he laid it out in the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous actions. The Buddha taught that what's to be abandoned and what's to be cultivated, according to the Buddha. So right would be that which is to be cultivated. You know, another great word would be skillful, skillful view, skillful intention, or productive, right? So you can use whatever word, but right works fine when you think about right according to the Buddhist view, right according to what the Buddha said. On a deeper note, the Pali term, which I can't remember off the top of my head, is also related to tuning of an instrument, having the proper tonation, the tuning of it, where that sweet spot, where it's not too tight and not too loose. The original term has a little bit to do with that, but right works great in our case. And then the first right view and right intention, as you can see, are here with higher understanding. And again, this is the SBT version here, right? SBT presentation. Higher virtue, we have right speech, right action, right livelihood. Now, as you can imagine, there's a whole bunch more you could add to that, but these are the basic ones, right? Right speech, right action, I think are pretty clear. Right livelihood needs a little explanation. It has to do with occupation, but it's more than just that. It really pertains to how you sustain your life, how you go about getting the things that you need in life, right? So you could have a good, honest job. You could be a constable or a priest in a church and have a great, wholesome job, but you could be stealing from the shop down the street, right? So it really has to do with all the things that we do to sustain our lives, right? Doing them in an honest, good way. And then we have higher awareness, our last category. And this has to do with right effort, right? The energy you put into things, right mindfulness, and right awareness. And so all three of these traditionally are believed to be related to meditation in the Theravada tradition. In the Mahayana tradition, they believe these three are just meant for practices in general. And I like the broader version because these three things we apply to not just meditation, but also other practices we do, like mindfulness practice or the 4 steps of acceptance, whatever we're doing, right? The 4 gifts. Right mindfulness, a great explanation of mindfulness is that sentry in the mind. It's that lighthouse that's looking out over everything. When we're meditating, we use right effort to make sure we have the right attitude and we have some energy going into our meditation. Again, we're not vegetating, we're meditating. And that takes a little bit of effort, right? But a soft effort, right? A soft, gentle, loving, kind, joyful effort. Mindfulness is that sentry that watches over our meditation and notices when we've gone into mind wandering or notices when we're not holding our mind on its object. It's that focused attention that allows us to be discerning and know what's happening in our mind during the meditation. And then right awareness is being able to get to that right place in meditation, right? It's be able to whether it's simply abiding in presence or deeper levels of stillness, samadhi. That's what right awareness is. We're trying to cultivate these higher mental meditative states. So those are the 3. Now, originally, as you remember, the Threefold Path were in a different order. It started with virtue at the top, then it had awareness, and then it had understanding. That's what I learned in school. Now, you could imagine how we'd have to move these Eightfold Path around to line up with the Threefold Path. They don't line up together, right? So I was kind of changing some things around. And our dear friend David says to me, offhanded, just like the easiest thing, he says, hey, why don't you just put this over here and they'll all work out together. And I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I studied a little bit, and I can't believe that I had never seen that in all of my years of study, that by simply moving higher understanding to the top, virtue and higher awareness, by changing that order, they line up perfectly with the Eightfold Path. And then I'm stuck with the idea that I'm very careful not to go too far away from tradition. There's a reason for it. There's standardized vocabulary of Buddhist terms is an important thing. And I don't take it lightly. The idea is that I want you guys to be able to talk to other Buddhists and be able to understand what they're saying and them to understand what you're saying. When we start changing all of this, it becomes a problem. Alexander Berzin, one of the great Tibetan translators, German, I think American, but German descent, he decided to use all his own terminology. Now, for scholars and serious students, it's wonderful because you get a completely different take on some of these topics, and it gives you so much more information. But for regular folks, his students have a lot of problems talking to other Buddhists, right? So I was careful about moving this, but as I studied it a little bit more, I found that other people had seen this same thing that David did, and that we're not alone, that this presentation now that we're looking at is becoming very popular in the West. And I had known that this is used by many modern Buddhist groups, but none of the traditional ones. Now you could say, well, why is that so, Tenzin Tarpa? Here's a couple ideas. One idea is that the Threefold Path was first taught, was the initial teaching was taught to lay people. One story I heard, and so the Buddha wanted them to kind of approach the path in a certain way. He wanted them to start with virtue, because the first thing in being a student of his is you have to be a good person, right? And then becoming a good, kind-hearted person is necessary. And then the next thing was awareness, which is related to practice, learning to meditate, things like that. And those all lead to higher understanding. So in that presentation, it's kind of in order of attainment, with the higher understanding as being the ultimate thing that we're searching for. But we can also look at it the opposite. And I think this presentation is more accurate. Even before we can practice virtue, we have to understand what virtue is. So the first thing the Buddha taught was what's to be accepted and what's to be abandoned, right? That's understanding. He taught people what virtue was. So understanding is the first thing you have to know. You have to learn a little bit about Buddhism. And that leads to the cultivation. Once you know what virtue is, then you can cultivate it. And through the cultivation of virtue and understanding, then you can start developing these higher states of awareness. And then the whole thing turns around again, and these higher states of awareness lead to even higher states of understanding and virtue. So I like this presentation. Another thought is, so that was one, that's how the Threefold Path was. It was initially taught in a different order because the Buddha believed that would be good for that audience. The Eightfold Path was taught second at a different time for a different audience that he believed this order would be better. And I do believe the order of the Eightfold Path is the best order in practice. Again, the great scholar Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote a great book on this. And so with him, even though we practice them all kind of at the same time, there is kind of an order. We do begin with right view. Right view is understanding, right? Right view, again, knowing the difference between right and wrong. That's the most basic we get. And then from there, it's understanding just the basics about Buddhism, right? Of course, that's the beginning. And what does that do? That leads to right intention. Once you know the difference between right and wrong, then you can have the right intention to act upon. Now, the next category of higher virtue, if you notice, they're all aspects of action. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. It's all about what we do. So we first have to understand right and wrong, develop an intention to do it before we actually practice them, right? And then through that, we get to higher awareness by putting in the right effort, by being mindful, and which means mastering our awareness, right? Being able to place, hold, and sustain our awareness. Those are higher mental and meditative states of awareness. So that's our present day. What do you guys think? I'll go into a little bit more detail about what they are. But what do you think of the two presentations? Don't be shy.
It makes a lot of sense to do it that way, to match it up with the Eightfold Path.
I think so too. When I was in school, the Tibetan tradition, nobody really talked about the Threefold Path. In fact, it was always believed that was a monastic practice. That's something monastics did. And I remember the Dalai Lama actually had a quote somewhere, and it said, all you practitioners out there, the threefold, they often call it the threefold training, the threefold way also. He said the Threefold Path is not just for monastics, it's for everyone, which I think is kind of out of touch with what the whole thing really is based on. That the Threefold Path isn't just a training, it is the Buddhist path itself. When people say, what's the Buddhist path? Well, it's three aspects: understanding, virtue, and awareness. Everything fits into that. And the Eightfold Path fits into that. The Eightfold Path is just a more detailed presentation of the Threefold Path. So to me, this way of thinking about it elevates the Threefold Path to be more important than just about anything. Dana, please share.
Well, when I've heard this today, what came to me was what our fellow Sangha members would probably say in the UK. This is brilliant.
I would agree.
And to teach this before, I was confused because I had studied the Eightfold Path, and that I didn't understand how it related to it. I could see that there was definitely similarities, and so I feel much more comfortable in where we're going now.
Excellent. Excellent. And I think a lot of people were saying that, why don't you just say the Eightfold Path, because we all know that. We don't know the Threefold Path. But the fact is, you know it because you've already studied it. But if you have people that are first coming to Buddhism, of course remembering three aspects is easier than remembering 8 aspects. And between you and me, I know the Eightfold Path. I have them memorized. I've studied them my whole life. But I now don't need that detail. For me, it's easier to practice them when I think about just the 3. When we talk about higher virtue, I know it's talking about right speech, right action, right livelihood, and I know about 20 more rights that are in there that aren't written there, right? Right relationships, right, just cool. There's just endless, right? Right generosity. And higher understanding as well, right view, right intention, right mind, right perception. There can be so many. And then higher awareness. This talks about the practice of cultivating awareness, but higher awareness includes presence, stillness. I think I've changed my mind on one terminology. I think stillness is synonymous with samadhi. I've gone back and forth with it, and again, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi was one that mentioned. He thought samadhi. One of the words you could use for samadhi was stillness, and then nirvana. Emptiness and enlightenment. They're all aspects of this higher awareness. They're all just different levels of it. Yeah, I think it works. I'm really happy with it. And I'm happy that we're not out on our own, that a great deal of modern Buddhist groups have adopted this. Though we are claiming full credit for it because we didn't get anybody's help. We thought of it on our own. Our great David helped us out.
Did David copyright this?
No, because I'm plagiarizing it. One of the advantages to being a teacher is I can steal all my students' good ideas.
I think Wayne was a good idea, though. I think that's a good
idea. So anyways, I think it's awesome. And again, for me, it's so much clearer in my mind to think about the Threefold Path on my own. Okay, so let's just a quick review. So this is the Threefold Path. This is the SBT Threefold Path. The development and attainment of higher understanding, higher virtue, higher awareness. Let me explain the word higher. What we're talking about here is we're not talking about everyday understanding, virtue, and awareness. Most of the people you meet are like this, right? Most people try to understand themselves and their lives. Most people try to be good people. Most people try to have some level of awareness, but we're not cultivating everyday aspects of these qualities. In Buddhism, we're talking about these higher levels, we're shooting for that. Of course, we start with more common levels, but our bar is set much higher, right? This level of Bodhisattva or Buddha. One day we hope to have these extraordinary levels of higher understanding, higher virtue, and higher awareness. So when you think about the Buddhist path, I want you just, those three things should come up every time. What's the Buddhist path? Oh, understanding, virtue, and awareness. I was thinking today, maybe we should call it the 3 pillars of Buddhism. That'd be catchy, wouldn't it? I'd never heard anybody refer to it like that. But instead of calling it the Threefold Path, we should call it the 3 pillars of Buddhism. And then we have the Eightfold Path. So that's that. The triangle still works. Originally, virtue was on the bottom. And they used to say, because everything's based on virtue. Virtue is the foundation for all Buddhist practice. And I say, well, I think understanding is the basis of all Buddhist practice. Because you can't practice virtue if you don't know proper virtue, right? If you listen to the wrong people, you might not practice very good virtue. And then here's the original if you want to look at it one more time. I'll make these available. I don't want to post this one. I don't want to confuse you. And then here's how they work with the Threefold Path and the Eightfold Path. So they're one and the same. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit more about what they are. Now that we're past the organization and the translation, the development of higher understanding is the wisdom aspect of the path, pertaining to the development of insight and understanding of the Buddhist teachings and the nature of ourselves and reality. Now, this isn't just book knowledge. And if you remember, I think we're going to talk about that in a moment. This is more than just book smarts. This is more than regurgitating something you read in one of the books. You know, this understanding is also equally experiential. It's your experience of life. It's the understanding you've gained through living, through experiencing situations with other people, from failing at things and from succeeding at things, right? So here, higher understanding, much more than just understanding the Buddhist teachings. It's understanding how to engage with them in real life, right? Very, very important. The development of higher virtue is the ethical aspect of the path pertaining to holding vows, cultivating our benevolent qualities, simply basic goodness, and cultivating awakened behavior. And so I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And the development of higher awareness, as we were talking about, is the practice aspect of the path pertaining to the development of higher mental and meditative states. It's the cultivation and attainment of these higher meditative and mental states that we hear about, like enlightenment and nirvana and the rest. Oh, I thought I had more to share about that. I think I do somewhere. One second. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit more about awareness. We had a nice talk on it in our first teaching today. I think I talked a lot about this. I'm just looking over my notes. Practicing. So the higher conscious awareness is developed through the practices of meditation and mindfulness, and is aimed again as gaining mastery over our awareness, both our focused attention and our peripheral awareness. It's the ability to gather and harness our too often scattered and fragmented awareness, and to develop it, and most importantly, to sustain it. And our first aim is the development of presence, which can lead to stillness, emptiness, nirvana, and awakening. So we talked about all that stuff. Good. Let's move on to the next. The next thing I want to talk about is the aspects of the Threefold Path. This is my presentation. This is original. In my own experience of them, there's something that people don't talk about, and they don't talk about the wisdom that arises from the three. So all three are deeply interconnected. When we talk about higher understanding, higher virtue, and higher awareness, they're all dependent upon each other, right? To develop higher understanding, it requires higher virtue. And of course, higher understanding is what cultivates higher virtue. And the same with higher awareness. In fact, all the great meditation teachers talk about that a requirement in reaching higher meditative states is the attainment of higher virtue, which sounds a little religious. It sounds a little hard to believe that. Well, why would being a good person have anything to do with my meditative powers? They all swear it does. And I think the idea is that when your mind and heart are more open, you have more access to working with your mind. So when we talk about the development of higher understanding, the wisdom is a wisdom gained it's a unique and expansive wisdom that sees through our ignorance, confusion, and delusion, right? It's a wisdom that undermines our afflictions and our cognitive biases, all these big modern words, all our problems, all our self-centeredness, our immaturity, right? An understanding that just cuts through all of that. That's what kind of a wisdom we're talking. When we talk about the wisdom through the development of virtue, it's an expansive wisdom that opens our hearts and minds and frees us from bias while allowing us to see the world in a more positive, inclusive, and wholesome way. So when we practice virtue, one of the greatest qualities, we often think that we practice virtue to be good people, and the universe rewards us by giving us things from our good karma, and somehow we have this supernatural relationship with the universe. That's really not how it works. Really, the way it works is very much grounded and very simpler. When we're closed off to the world, when we don't practice virtue, when we're closed off, when we're selfish, when we're self-concerned, it closes down our consciousness and it makes our world smaller. It makes our mind smaller. It makes our life smaller. And we simply close off and we our information that we gain, our development is very closed off. But when we practice virtue, it's this opening of our heart and mind that we're really working towards. It's not some cosmic pat on the back by some parent figure that lives in the sky that tells us, "Good job, Tarpa. Here's a lolly." That's not how it works. It's about opening our hearts and minds. It's about being open-minded. When we practice virtue, it opens our hearts and minds. And we take in more information. When you're open to other people's experiences. You look at the world through other people's eyes, right? Your head lifts out of that dark little box of selfishness and self-centeredness. Your head lifts, you see the world around you. You see how people are interacting. You feel the transaction of love between people. It's a bigger world that we live in. It's an opening of our mind and our hearts. And that selfish self-centeredness is just a closing, a dark closing, like climbing into a closet. This is the wisdom of virtue. It's actually opening our eyes to the world around us. That kind of a wisdom. And we have a wisdom that's gained through the development of higher awareness, that through transcending our busyness, our speediness, our exaggerated sense of immediacy and self-importance. That's okay. I could probably rewrite that. But this is about, once we experience presence, this is a whole new world to us, right? Most people have never experienced presence or stillness. So when we learn to control and gain mastery over our awareness, life changes. There's information that's taken in at an experiential level. When you're meditating and you have an incredible experience, right? You could never learn that from a book. Nobody could communicate that to you. It's direct it's experiential, and it's pure knowledge. You learn something. You learn something about yourself. You learn something about the state. But even more importantly, oftentimes these experiences bring with them insight and wisdom into the world around us, right? And then there's insight meditation, right? Which is more related to higher understanding, in which we actively cultivate wisdom, understanding, and insight through our meditation, right? So there's a great wisdom that comes along from all of them. And then another thing I'd like to say about higher awareness is that when we become present, when we slow down, when we become calm, we take in the world in a different way. That little circle of attention that we're used to seeing the world through, right, expands. And we, again, literally take in more information. Where I think probably a lot of you notice as meditators, we start to just be more aware of the world around us. Like we notice things around us that have always been there that we've never noticed before. How about our practice of appreciation, which kind of covers all of these, in which we actively practiced appreciation, and we all talked about how it was like getting new eyes, how somehow we just started to see the world in a completely different way, a much more expansive way. That's how these work, right? So for each one of these, the threefold path, there's a distinct wisdom that arises from them. And each wisdom is directly related and dependent upon the others. So we chop these three up into three neat little sections so we can understand it. But ultimately, more and more, I think that it's really just one quality. They're so interdependent. The three make up one quality, which we don't have a word for. Or maybe the word is enlightenment, right? Because when we have fully mastered understanding virtue and awareness, that's direct experience of right view. That is enlightenment. When those are taken to the highest level, that is enlightenment itself, right? Isn't that fascinating? Oh, any questions? Any thoughts, any ideas? What do you guys think? I'm open to suggestions. How did I do, David? Did I do a good presentation of our idea?
You were on fire, Tarpa.
Good. And what do you guys think? You know, my real aim throughout the whole thing is simplicity and clarity. That's what my job in SBT, I believe, is Buddhism is so complex sometimes, and I think overly complex. I think it's a lot of scholars just trying to outdo each other. Where if our real goal is awakening, then we go about it in a different way. So if you want to awaken, you need clarity to do that, and simplicity breeds clarity. So I'm hoping this presentation really simplifies the Buddhist path for everybody. You know, the Buddha had this story. He picks up a handful of leaves, and a student was bothering him. A student wanted to know all the secrets to the universe. Why do planets do this, and why are there lights in the sky? And after a while, the Buddha picks up a handful of leaves and he says, "Are there more leaves in my hand or in all the trees of the forest?" And the man said, "Oh, clearly all the trees in the forest have immensely more leaves than what's in your hand." And he goes, and I can never say this one correctly, but in a sense he says, "Well, the leaves in my hand is the amount of knowledge you need for awakening. You don't need to know everything in the universe to awaken. Keep it simple." There's my paraphrase. The Buddha said, "Keep it simple, dummy." Quote. That's what Tenzo Tarpa says. I'll have to make a meme. Keep it simple, stupid. So that's the hope here, is to really clarify, make this simple so it's understandable. And when it is, you can practice it, right? Sangpo.
I was actually going to say it simplifies things, but it doesn't undermine things, which is, if you look at the Four Noble Truths, which lead to the Eightfold Path, what we have through Threefold is, in our understanding and linking that to the Eightfold, is we have almost the roadmap for SBT and how we look at secular Buddhism. We're not reinventing anything. We're not reinventing a wheel. We're not saying that we are creating something different for the modern age. We're actually taking it back to the original meaning, but saying this is how it now fits. And that for me gives me clarity and simplifies it and understand. I've got a better understanding.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of the traditions have been preservists more than, innovation is not a popular thing in Buddhism. The job of all monks throughout 2,000 years have been to preserve exactly the Buddhist teachings. You never dare add to it. That's a modern idea of doing it. But I think there is some things that we can do to make good presentations for our own community. Thank you, Sampo. I'm with you. Yeah, Marian.
How do we know that our understanding is high enough?
Oh, we check with the sutras. So the Buddha sutras are always there. One of the cool ways to work with the sutras is to use AI. Now, if you ask AI about the sutras, it just lies terribly. You cannot trust it, but you can trust AI to tell you where the information is found in the sutras. And this is what I do. So if you're looking up, so say Threefold Path, you go to ChatGPT and you say, what sutras contain information on the Threefold Path? And then AI will point it out to you. And if they're wrong, you simply won't be able to find that information in that sutra. But AI can't change the sutras. You're going to a different site like Sutra Central or something, or I go to Comedy Central for mine, and so that's what we do, and that's what I do before all my teachings, right? Everything we do, it's a lot of effort. Everything that I teach, you first have to go through and see what the other teachers think, and I have my go-to people that the scholars in each tradition that I really appreciate, that I think are really great. Like Bhikkhu Bodhi's a god in Theravada Buddhism. He's so amazing, and the Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism, Chandakirti, Tsongkhapa, and so that's what we do. But oftentimes in sutras, you'll find that different sutras will say different things. So there's great amount of misunderstandings or in the sutras. So that's kind of where the teachers come in. The teachers can weigh that out. The best weapon that we have is to have the broadest knowledge and understanding of the sutras. So when disparages come up, we can understand that, in this other one, it talked about those. And so you can kind of play it by the odds. Well, 3 sutras say this, one says this, we go with that. But so we really never really know. And we really never know if the sutras are actually what the Buddha said. They weren't written down for more than 500 years after the Buddha passed away. So that's why we're agnostics. We understand the nature of knowledge, right? And we can focus on what works, what's worked for me, what's worked with my teachers. Yeah. Hold on a second. I got a compliment on the chat group. I need to read this. Oh, thank you, Rinchen. Rinchen likes my presentation of higher virtue from a secular point of view. Yeah. And of course, I'm never just telling everybody what to believe. I'm sharing a presentation with you. I try to share all the different views that I can from Theravada, from Zen. We want you to decide for yourselves. I'm not arrogant enough that I can just tell everybody what is. I don't know. I have a pretty good knowledge, though. No one, please.
Yes, I was just reflecting on your comments about a monk's duty to try to keep the honest reflection of what was the truth, a truthful reflection of what the Buddha said. And I've experienced a lot of frustration myself in trying to understand what is the correct translation for so many of these different terms. And I just want to comment that I think you've done a really good job with these threefold path of getting a good translation. I think that the challenge with translations is to try to get the proper words that explain what the content was, but in a manner that's understandable in our current language. And that's
You're exactly right.
It's a very delicate balancing act. And I think you've done well with that. And I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're exactly right. And what it actually is that you have to understand there's a big difference between translation and interpretation, right? In English, say we have a word like cool, right? Well, you can interpret that. Imagine using the word, you find the word cool in some kind of scripture and you say, it's a person who has a lower body temperature than other people, where they don't understand, oh no, when we mean cool, we mean somebody that's hip, right? Somebody that's fun. And so interpretation's limited. That's the starting point. Translation's the starting point. It's limited. Interpretation is where it comes in. Someone who can interprets it, says they've seen that word used in multiple sutras across, and they know that, well, sometimes it's used in different contexts, but what they really mean is this. It doesn't necessarily matter what the actual translation, right? The Sanskrit words and where they come from, that's irrelevant. What's relevant is how it's used and the meaning behind it. That's a difference between a translator and an interpreter. Interpreters are superior. Yeah. Thank you. Dana, please.
This brings up a question of mine, is that I've seen recently a film of Tibetan monks, right? And that they probably maybe at the monastery that you were at in India. But they go out in the evening, they go out and they debate.
Yeah.
If there's only one way to look at this, to pass it on, what are they debating, and who decides who wins the debate?
Yeah, dialectic debate is a way not of telling people what to think, but teaching them to think. What they're doing in Tibetan monasteries, they're teaching people to be philosophers. It's a method for developing a philosopher's mind. So you get a topic, let's say they're small kids. The greatest thing about debate is that it's fun. So you have, 12-year-old kids who are practicing being philosophers. You can't teach philosophy to kids, but this works. And so they get a topic, they get some ideas about the topic, they get some ideas about questions, debates. They go on the debate, but they're not given an answer. They all go to the debate ground, the debate. Then in the evening, they come back and the teacher asks them what they came up with. And everybody shares. Sometimes the teacher will do a little debate in classroom with them to show their errors. But ultimately, there is a right answer that each tradition has. And as much as they claim that they want everybody to think for themselves, you are kind of expected to have their answer by the end of the day. So there's a little bit of dogma there. I need to move on if that's okay. I didn't realize it was getting late. I still have a couple things I want to share, and I want to do it briefly. Let's talk about practicing the threefold path. See if I can multitask, speak, and push buttons at the same time. So the way we practice the threefold path, I think all of you probably know this already. Development of higher understanding is through the three great objectives of study, contemplation, and meditation. Study, either reading it, listening to a teacher, a teaching, or actually experiencing something directly, you could call study too. Watching, introspection, watching yourself during the day, watching other people and their behavior. These are all forms of study. And then contemplation is, sitting back and thinking about what that was, what you read, what you experienced, and then bring it into meditation. And here specifically, they're talking about insight meditation, where you're meditating on a concept or an idea. So we all have that. Right now you're practicing it. You're in this class. After this class, you're going to think about what I talked about. You're going to review your notes. Hopefully you'll bring it into your insight meditation for an even deeper understanding. And the great thing about the 3 great objectives, it turns conceptual knowledge into direct experience, right? You take it off the page, and by contemplating and then meditating it, you get those euphoric, you get those aha moments where you go, oh, that's what Tarpa meant. That big long speech. Oh, this is what it meant by that, right? That's what happens. Number 2, the development of higher virtue. We're doing that with basic goodness, being a good person, going out there being kind, your morning affirmations that you all do, cultivating the 10 virtuous actions, holding vows, etc. We're all doing that right now. Number 3, the development of higher awareness, meditation, mindfulness, and the cultivation of presence and stillness. So it's clear when we're talking about meditation, but it's important to think about this in mindfulness as well. So remember, mindfulness is basically meditation when we're not on the cushion. It's the same practice of meditation while engaged in life, right? And what are we trying to do? We're trying to hold and sustain our awareness in the present moment or the present activity, right? We're trying to sustain that awareness, right? That's the practice at hand here. And so much of practices of higher awareness is so much about sustaining. It's sustaining whatever, patience, kindness, presence, awareness, whatever it may be. So when people ask you, what's your practice? If you said meditation, it would be accurate, but that would only be one of your practices, right? The threefold path are your practices. That's why they call them the threefold training. And guess what? Just like the threefold wisdoms, these are all interconnected as well. They all benefit one another. One of the problems with Buddhism in the West is that they simply extract meditation and study. And those are kind of the 2 things that do. I don't mean to generalize, but I think you know what I'm saying. So much of the time they do that, but they leave out all the real meat of Buddhism behind. The Buddhism's teaching on virtue and training, holding vows and things like that. So no one of these is more important than the other. I think nowadays we overly emphasize meditation. Yes, it is extraordinarily beneficial. It's an incredible practice. But I don't see meditation as being any more important than virtue. Your practice of opening your heart and your mind to the world around you, dealing with people in a very decent and good way, practicing generosity and care and kindness towards others. This has such an amazing effect on our awareness, right? And then also understanding. If you don't understand the world around you, how can you really have a sense of awareness about it? So these 3 need to be practiced in balance, right? They're holistic. We practice all 3 together. No one is more important than the others. And if you don't mind, I'll share something personal. While I was reflecting on this, I was thinking, I think most people think I must be some kind of amazing meditator, and I experience these higher states of meditation. I've done pretty good, but I think I've always had to work harder at it than my other colleagues. And I have my own, like you, we all have our issues and things that are hard. My ADHD doesn't help me very well with meditation and other things as well. But nevertheless, you keep at it. So for me, oftentimes I think a lot of the awakening that I've experienced have come more from understanding, which is something I'm really good at, and virtue. And so sometimes when I think about friends who are amazing meditators and how no matter how hard I try, I don't seem to be able to practice at that level. But the fact is I'm still awakening. And in some ways, I think I have a broader, more peripheral sense of awakening than some of them. So meditation isn't the only thing that awakens us. It's these other things as well. They are equally as important. So I'm hoping that's a pep talk to all of you. So whichever ones you're having trouble with, all of these practices are like anything else. Some people are talented at them more than others. I was lousy at sports. I was talented at music. Everyone's different, right? I have to work at meditation. I'm not a natural meditator. I can't simply sit and shut my mind off like some of my friends for hours. I'm lost. It's amazing to watch them. And at the other side of it, they don't seem to have the understanding of the teachings that I do. Some of them. Or some of them seem to struggle with virtue. And some monks who are celibate, they really battle that their whole lives. Where with me, it was the easiest thing in the world to be celibate. So each one of us has strengths and weaknesses. That's okay, and it should be that way. We all have different minds. So I'd like you to broaden your idea of what practice is. And when I say how's your practice, don't think how's your meditation or mindfulness. Think about the Threefold Path. How's your understanding about life? How's your accumulation of virtue, Okay? That's the pep talk. I long ago decided to be an honest monk. I think so many people that are meditators are kind of afraid to really give an honest opinion of their own meditation, because it's a secret thing, right? Nobody knows really who's attained what. And so everybody kind of says, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And we just kind of set it aside. But I think if people were really honest about it, we'd all see that other people are a lot more like we are. I think we all expect too much in our meditations. We all set the bar too high. We all think that we should be experiencing this at this level. And I think that that's a big mistake. That just leads to frustration. Accept where you are, love it. That's what you are. Sure, try to get better. Wonderful. But accept where you are. I once wanted to write a book, an anonymous book that I would go around and talk to all the masters and have them write down their honest experiences of their meditation practice. Wouldn't that be interesting? I think we'd all be surprised by it. Wow, he's just like me. Dana, can you make it short? Okay. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. So I hope this was illuminating to everybody. It was really beneficial to me to be able to share it with everybody, to get your ideas. And so this will be the presentation in the next 6-week skillful living program. And again, I think it's really clear now. And let alone for you, it's so clear for myself and my own path. And like I always say, clarity is what leads to awakening more than anything else. Those three aspects of the Threefold Path, they all result in clarity. That's what we're shooting for. So hopefully that's good.